Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is Reverend Crothers here? Well, let me give our invocation then. Dear God, we thank you for this holiday that we were just granted. We ask that all of us who sit here tonight to discuss these items important to our city, use our best judgment, use our best interest, and do your work. We pray in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Gavarrecki.
Present.
Councilman Templin.
Present.
Councilman Cisco.
Present.
Councilman Hayes.
Present.
Councilman DeGiulio.
Here.
Pro Tem Keenan.
Present.
Mayor Mategas.
Present.
We have a quorum, sir.
Thank you. A motion for the corrections and approval of the agenda, but before I take the motion, I would advise the council that Mr. Kavir has said that his item should be stricken tonight, and we'll take that up at a later time. There are evidently some developments that need to be discussed between us and the Ford Motor Company. So that change there, could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Supported.
Move, I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes?
Supported.
Okay, Mr. DeGiulio supported. Are there any discussion, corrections, changes?
So that, just so the public's aware, if they don't have a copy, the closed session that was referred to will be postponed to another evening. Correct, Mayor?
Correct.
Thank you.
Hearing none, I'll ask for the vote. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Same sign. Carried. Thank you. We're going to go to citizens' comments on agenda items, and since there was a little confusion last week, I am going to do and read the city's rules of decorum again, so bear with me. An individual may only speak on an issue after the individual has been recognized by the chairperson. Comments from the floor shall be made at the podium at the front of the council table or at such other area as designated by the chairperson. Prior to an individual speaking from the floor, the individual will identify themselves and state their address for the record. And that address would be their street address. It doesn't need their number. Sir, would you just remain seated for a moment, please?
Sure.
All comments shall be directed only to the chairperson. Speakers are not to address other members of the council or members of the audience. Each member of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes on matters that are on the agenda and up to 5 minutes at the end of our meeting. A delegation or group will be allowed to speak up to 10 minutes. Unused time is forfeited after the speakers relinquish the floor. All written statements should be given to the city clerk prior to the meeting so that copies may be made available to members of the public body. No individual shall be allowed to make any defamatory attack or invasion of another's individual personal life. If the person making the comments is allowed to continue, the person who is being challenged or whom the comments are made against shall be entitled to make an immediate rebuttal statement. For purposes of these rules as they relate to elected officials or city officials, the term personal life shall refer to anything other than that which is said or done in the person's official capacity as an elected official or in the person's official city capacity. Members of the public body may question the speakers, but the members of the public body are not obligated to answer any questions or make any statements on the issues raised or discussed by the speakers. No person or group shall be allowed to disrupt the meetings or proceedings. Any individual who fails to comply with these rules after having first been warned by the chairperson to cease such actions shall be ordered by the chairperson to leave or be ejected from the meeting. So with that, we could have our citizens come forward.
I'm waiting to be recognized.
If you'd state your name for the record, please.
When I'm recognized as being at the microphone, that was one of your rules. that I have to be recognized by the chair.
You're recognized, sir.
Matt Tracer, resident of Allen Park. Now, also in the rules of decorum, it states that Robert's rules shall be the rules these meetings are conducted by. Should any of council gain a minimum knowledge of Robert's rules, and should they decide to deal with your parliamentary overreach and challenge the chair, my question is, who functions as our official parliamentarian should a challenge to the chair occur? Come on now. You're the one that's shoving these rules down our throat as a threat.
Mr. Tracer, do I have your name correctly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, there is pending litigation which you have filed against the city and I believe against the mayor. And as a result of that, he's going to be, he's not going to say, he's not going to respond to you because a lot of what he says may be used against him at a later point, or at least attempt to be used against him.
Then how about you, Mr. Mystery Attorney? See, in all the months you've been here, obviously you don't all have the intellectual power to put a piece of masking tape up there and put your name on so we know who you are.
My name is Joseph Kavir.
Oh, okay. These city attorneys come and go with the wind. So maybe we could see what your name is when we're addressing you. And you're fearful of stating who our designated parliamentarian is should a challenge to the chair occur. We have to have one. Who is it?
Mr. Tracer, I don't know.
But wait a minute, Mr. Mayor, you're threatening us with these rules at every meeting. Should we overstep our boundaries, you've had me arrested. You just had Malcolm Beaton escorted out by the police. Now, these are the rules you're supposed to follow. And I will ask again, who is our designated parliamentarian should there be a challenge to the chair?
Yeah.
Well, that was the answer I expected.
Well, okay. I just want to
Do you
remind.
have one?
Sorry, just want to remind yourself and all the citizens that this is the citizens' comment portion of the agenda.
Agenda. The rules are part of the agenda.
Thank you.
Brian Debo, Allen Park. Congratulations, Dennis, for getting an item on the agenda. I guess pigs do fly. I would recommend that the panel adopt his resolution for the waiver, so at least the community center will be part of the process. I'd like to remind all of you that you just borrowed $3.3 million, and to rule out the potential best managed solution, most cost-effective solution, would be irresponsible at this point in time. So I highly recommend you to accept what Dennis is going to be proposing. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens' comment on agenda items at this time? Seeing no one come forward, we'll move to the agenda item of Ms. Parker, update on Southfield lease properties in City Hall. Ms. Parker.
Good afternoon to the mayor and members of City Council, as well as residents in Allen Park. I'd like to just briefly talk about a couple of items as updates from the last meeting with the members of the City Council. One is in reference to the Southfield lease properties, and I'd just like to share with the community that we have been working fairly diligently in terms of identifying options related to the sale of the property. At this point in time, we've received 3 proposals, and I am considering one proposal in a very serious situation. I've requested and received concurrence from the mayor and council. And so basically what I'd like to do within the next 2 weeks is provide a more detailed report on what is being considered related to the properties. The other part related to the properties is in reference to the outstanding debt service on the bonds issued for the Southfield East properties. As you are aware, the city did borrow money related to the properties, and in the event that we're able to move forward with a sale related to the properties, the intent is to retire the debt related to the bonds and reissue bonds at a lower amount, which would basically lower the outstanding debt service that is being required for the city to pay at this point in time. So they're both interrelated, and I hope to be able to share more information within the next 2 weeks. The second item is in reference to City Hall options. At a special meeting with the City Council, there was a discussion related to the 4 options discussed at the last regular meeting for the City Council. And during the special meeting, there was some consideration given to the financial impact with each one of the options. We are going to be exploring at least 2 of the options in more detail, and before actually coming to some type of final resolution. And I'd like to encourage the residents here in Allen Park to perhaps share with the city, any comments you might have related to the 4 options presented at the last City Council meeting. If there is a need for information, feel free to make contact either with my office or the city administrator's office, and we can make the information available to you as well. And then thirdly, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our director for our community center, Mr. Patrick Hawkins. And Mr. Hawkins, if you could just stand up for a moment, maybe come to the podium so that residents that are not here at the meeting will know who you are. Mr. Hawkins started with the city last week, and right now he's actively involved in assessing where things are at with the community center, making arrangements related to getting our contracts in place for the upcoming season for the center, and also pursuing areas that we've started with as far as getting the center up to a certain standard. So, I'm really pleased to see him on board, and I think the expectations are fairly high. If you should have questions or if you'd like to meet him, he is at the community center on a daily basis. And then we've also received several inquiries related to the smart meters, and there's been a request to have DTE attend a city council meeting to answer questions and provide information to the residents. We did reach out to DTE today requesting their attendance at our next meeting for June 10th. We're not able to confirm tonight whether they will be in attendance, but I will be working with the mayor to look at perhaps having some type of opportunity for the residents to hear from them directly. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Ms. Parker has another meeting to go to, so I don't know if she wants to excuse herself now or whether she's still got a few moments.
Still have some time.
But she may be leaving here shortly, so if you see her get up and leave, hopefully it's not an indication of what's going on at a meeting. She does have another one. At this point, Councilman Hayes' resolution is before us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you heard Mrs. Parker just mention, the issue of City Hall is kind of on the table, and there are probably several options for what to do: build, buy, lease, retrofit, whatever. And so one of those several options, one of them was the consideration of determining whether it's even feasible to utilize a portion of the existing Civic Center by repurposing some of the rooms and offices and stuff to that purpose. And in my vision, it's not the entire building, certainly, and it's not even a major portion of it, but rather certain functions I think would be very amenable. But there's an underlying potential impediment to our even considering that. It's our building. You paid for it with millage monies, but we also got a contribution from the Department of Natural Resources grant program of about less than 10% of the cost of that structure, about $500,000. They gave us a grant. And in their grant documents, it says that before we do something other than use it for recreation, because it was a recreation kind of grant, we must have their prior written approval. And it also calls for possible mitigation, meaning if you're going to not use it for recreation anymore, you got to come up with another location or whatever to do that, mitigate the change in use. So therefore, I propose to Mrs. Parker that we write the governor and ask him if they could possibly consider waiving that, given our financial condition, our financial emergency, which occasioned her even being here in the first place, and make an exception, particularly in light of the small amount of money that was provided by the state. So what I have done, Mrs. Parker said she didn't have a problem sending a letter particularly, but she thought we should have a resolution. So I've proposed the following resolution. I hope that gives you enough background to understand. Whereas the City of Allen Park was awarded a grant in 2002 for partial funding of an addition to the Civic Center, and whereas the grant provided approximately 8%, $500,000 of the total funds necessary to improve the Civic Arena, the rest having been derived from voter-approved millage, and whereas the grant had a requirement indicating that should another purpose other than recreation be desired for the use of the improved facility, written prior approval and mitigation, if not waived, would be required of the state and specifically the DNR, the grantor therein, and whereas the city is now faced with a need to look elsewhere for a new location for certain of its city hall functions and offices, and since the Civic Center is one of several locations under consideration, it seems entirely prudent and timely to seek the necessary written approval and waivers of any mitigation at this juncture in the event that the Civic Center is ultimately determined to be a suitable alternative location for our deteriorating City Hall. And whereas the state grant amount was rather trifling in relation to the total project cost, it seems fully reasonable that the requested approval and waivers will most likely be deemed to be expected to be forthcoming. Now therefore be it resolved. The City of Allen Park hereby seeks the approval of the State of Michigan Department of Natural Resources for the use of a portion of the improved Civic Arena for purposes of housing certain of the functions and offices of Allen Park City Hall as determined by the needs then found to exist, and further that the state waive any mitigation or any repayment of any of the grant monies, prorated or otherwise, based on the small contribution of the project the grant represented, the age of the improvements, and the fact that the change in use will not materially affect the operations of recreation programs currently provided in the setting affected. At a regularly scheduled meeting of the City of Allen Park City Council, May 27th, this resolution was presented, moved, and supported with the votes taken as follows. That's my resolution.
To concur with Mr. Hayes for the purpose of discussion.
Mr. Keenan is seconded. Mr. Hayes, do you have a further statement you wish to make in regard to the resolution?
I hope I said enough already. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Mr. Keenan?
Yeah, Dennis, I don't know if by way of a friendly amendment or what, I'll support you on it. If you remove the fourth or fifth whereas, and you end it at otherwise, then be it resolved. I know you think I have thin skin like rest of us here in Allen Park, but I find the fifth whereas really offensive and quite frankly not needed. I think that calling $500,000 trifling is ridiculous. $500,000 is a lot of money to me, and I don't see where that whereas is needed for the purpose of what you're trying to do. And likewise, anything after otherwise, where it says based on a small contribution of the project, the grant, and the age of, I don't think any of that is necessary either. And I do think that, in fact, moving City Hall would change the material effect of the operations. But again, I do think it's a good idea to have our options and to know whether or not it is even a viable option. So if you'd be willing to make those changes, I would be willing to support you, but I can't support it as it's stated right now.
I have no problem removing the fifth whereas. However, with respect to the other couple items, because those are specifically mentioned in the grant application, I thought it was important that we include those, because that is some of the language that's embodied in the grant application. So I think it's important that we reference those, because we can argue whether you or I agree that it'll materially affect the recreation. I suppose that's where the final vote would come down to, but I think because it is in the grant document, I think we have to address it at some point. But I have no problem removing that, Mr. Mayor, and I'd accept that as an amendment to my resolution.
For the record, would that just be the fifth whereas then?
Yeah, that's what I would cede to, yes.
You agree, Mr. Keenan?
I agree with the one, but I still, I mean, I was at a graduation party at the Civic Center on Saturday in the area that potentially, if we were to move there, we would use, and I do think it'll affect the operations, and I contend still that for the purposes of what we're asking the state to do, to give us a variance to use it for City Hall, I think if they're willing to give it or not is irrelevant as to whether it changes the material effect of the operation. So
Well,
again,
Mr. Mayor, let me just say this, that
Wait,
a graduation party is not ipso facto recreation.
Okay.
It's an extraordinary use of the property that's not anything to do with recreation.
yeah, let's try and go forward. I think the amendment by Mr. Hayes and Mr. Keenan to the resolution is simply to drop 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth paragraph. And that's where we're at with the motion. Now, as to Mr. Keenan, if you want any other changes, then I assume you make an amendment and see where we go from there, okay? I mean, we can have amendments to it, and they'll be voted on before the original motion would be. If not, then I'll take.
well, then I would make an amendment to stop the paragraph at otherwise, make a period there, and that paragraph would end there.
So for the record, you'd end it at prorated?
Prorated or otherwise, period.
Okay.
Where are we there? Because I'm not picking it up fast enough.
Whereas is that under? Bob, where is that?
Prorated or otherwise?
Yep.
Did you say ended at otherwise?
Yeah, the fifth line up from the bottom, not counting A's and A's.
Do I have a second to Mayor Pro Tem Keenan's amendment?
Well, in the spirit of collegiality, I'll
Can
second
you go over
that.
that once again, please? About what's being taken out?
I will go through that 1 second. Let me copy this down. Mr. Hayes did support that, removal of any language after otherwise. Okay, the first amendment that was agreed upon was to remove the fifth paragraph, whereas the state grant amount was a rather trifling amount in relation to the total project costs. And then it goes on. And then what we're gonna do after that is now therefore be it resolved, and then you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line. After the word otherwise, we're gonna put a period and remove all the language to the word affected. And then what we're gonna do from there is we're still gonna leave in at the regularly scheduled meeting.
And I would aver to that change in the spirit of collegiality.
Okay, so we have the two changes, and they're going to change the resolution, deleting the fifth paragraph, and in the second to last paragraph, prorated or otherwise, period. And then that rest of that line and the next two lines would be deleted. Do we understand the motion as it currently stands? Is there anyone that wishes to speak against the motion? that I speak against the motion, but I do wish to speak to the motion. I'd like the citizens to realize that December 5th, 2004, we dedicated that community center. When we say voter-approved millage, yes, the millage, along with revenues derived there, pay the bonds that built that facility out. The drawings that we looked at say that we would be converting approximately a $34,000 addition, which represents the community center. $23,000 would be taken away and used as city facilities.
Square feet, not dollars.
Yeah, 34,000 square feet was the size of the addition, 23,000. So when we say that it's not going to be impactful of programs, I don't understand how that is. And the other issue is, we just hired Mr. Hawkins last week. I'm sure he hasn't come out with a whole new array of programs and whatnot that he wants to do. He's still, looking at the facility. But by the same token, the Parks and Recreation Commission are updating the Parks and Recreation plan for the city, which was last done in 2001, supposed to be done all every 5 years, and it hasn't. And really, I think part of the problem with the drop in usage of our facility has been that we just have not had the right people in place and pushed forward and updated our plan. I would just say to you, if you go back and look at the plan that was adopted in 2001, there was the recommendation that the community center be built out for the citizens and replace the old building that was quite small there on White Street. In fact, that building, the basement, was used as a shooting range for adult shooting and for our police department. So it wasn't even entirely used as a recreation facility. And you read that report saying that is a shortage of recreational facilities in Allen Park for citizens of all ages, be they seniors or be our young people. But I think taking 2/3 of the way of a plan that the people of this city thought was important for us to do certainly will never be my first choice to go that direction. I just think the citizens should understand that there are 4 options. We're actually exploring, I guess, 2 options, and evidently we now know what one of the 2 options are. But I think that it is a real step backward for this city developing and going forward. A city, to be sustainable, has to provide security for its people with police and fire, good streets, good lighting, good water. Sewers have to function. But it also has to have good schools, and it has to have recreational opportunities for all areas and ages of our community. And I think taking this away from us would represent a step backward and making it much more difficult for this city to become a sustainable one and attracting young families to come and raise those children here. So that's my statement as to the issue.
May I remark on that, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly can.
I want to just make sure people don't, one of the proposals with regard to the Civic Center is that we would repurpose 23,000 square feet because some architect came up with that number somewhere years ago when he came up with a plan. My notion is that this has to be thought through carefully. We don't need 23,000 square feet for the purposes that I propose that would move there. There are other opportunities in this community other than just that building. But we need the threshold approval to even consider utilizing a portion of that building. The trouble with our government here and elsewhere is that it's an all or nothing proposition. It's either this or that. And I see there's gradations in between where we could possibly use, for example, the front area with the window. I could see cross-training and repurposing water, clerk, treasurer functions right there in a perfectly sound, logical place. There's a couple offices inside of there also. You could put some activity there that would be government activity, that would be more efficient than what we currently have. You know, if you come in here to get a building permit, you go over there, then you come to the treasurer, you pay it, then you got to go back and show them the receipt. This way you'd have a one-stop shopping. There's a lot of things we could do. The trouble is when we have this blanket, we're taking 23,000. I don't propose to take 23,000, but that's what the architect proposed. We haven't vetted this. We haven't had public hearings. We haven't had alternative plans. We have a single plan that dates back many, many years when we had a lot more staff. The square footage requirements were based on a time when we had far more staff than we do currently, yet we continue believing that that number of 28,000 square feet is the sacrosanct number. It's not. So there's a lot of changes, and I respect the mayor's point of view. I happen to agree with a lot of what he said, that it's important to have those quality of life types of programs, but we also have to learn how to purpose our buildings and our resources in a fashion that maximizes our ability to survive financially. And I think we have other buildings that we could consolidate things in and do a lot of things if we gave it a lot of thought and thought it through and not just made it, it's either this or that. It's either tear this down or get a new one. You know, it's got to be thought through fully. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to respond because you mentioned a different number. I said 23,000. I didn't even mention the 5,000. The architects say that realistically we need about 28,000 square feet for our police and for the city functions. The 5,000 would be an addition on the back, as I understand the plan that was presented to us a couple of weeks ago. And think about it, you've got a recreation facility for young people. We're purposing it. We're going to put the police department here. We're going to put our jails here. And yes, we'll make it as secure from the rest of the building as we can. But now you're saying I'm using a jail in the same building that I'm using for recreation.
I'm not saying that. You are.
Well, I'm just saying the things that have been presented to us. And it isn't so long ago they started looking at this, and 28,000 seemed to be a reasonable size for this city to meet its obligations for its city functions and for its police department's functions. So that addition represents its own problem to me on that building.
I don't propose an addition. But again, that's that all or nothing plan. We take theirs,
Okay.
and we don't have any other options. That's
You
the
made
problem.
your statement about it, and I've made mine.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, it moved along so quick, I was still writing when.
Okay. Councilman Temple, sorry.
Just want to say about the resolution is that I see where he's coming from. I wish we could do it a lot quicker with DNR than just going through a resolution. I don't know how fast DNR is going to give us a response to this, but it seems to me that's just going to delay things. I'm not in favor of City Hall moving into our community center. Like you said, like it's been said, we need a recreation department. The voters voted for a community center. We just hired a recreation director that hopefully he'll be able to get it moving. It's been lacking for the last few years, and we've actively gone forth prior and told people that our recreation department wasn't being run, that we were going to give, that we gave it to Temple, that we let go of the fitness center. And I just want to see that we have a chance to make this work, the community center, and putting City Hall in it just isn't the way that I believe it should go. That's all I want to say.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman DiGiulio.
Okay, Mr. Hayes is proposing that we're just going to see if it's feasible to do it. There's nothing definite about going along with that and going into the community center. We're just wanting to take a vote and see if we should investigate the possibility. So therefore, it's just a vote to investigate the possibility, and that's it.
Mayor Pro Tem Keenan.
Yeah, I just want to be clear on my support of the resolution, and along with what Angelo said. The Civic Center is absolutely not my first choice for City Hall either. and quite frankly, I'm not in favor of it myself. But I do think that we have to explore every option that we have, and we need to know whether or not it's a viable option. It is one of the 4 options that was presented to us. There have been architectural drawings made on it, and I think that we owe it to you folks, and I know that people don't like to hear the word, but we owe it to you folks to do our due diligence, and part of that is knowing whether it's even okay with the state to do it. So, I mean, I'm in support of it only because I think we should find out. It's certainly not something that I want to do, or it's not my first choice, but I think it does need to be fully vetted, and that's why I supported it. But don't misunderstand for a minute to think that I'm in favor of moving City Hall to Parks and Recreation.
Any other councilman want to speak to the issue? Councilman Cisco.
You know, it wasn't just not so long ago, a few years ago, that we had people coming into this room and demanding that the recreation center be closed because we financially couldn't support it. And I was not in favor of that at that point. And it just seems to me that this resolution is a thinly veiled attempt to once again close the community center. We need to open our eyes to what's going on in our city. The voters spoke for this. They wanted it. It's a viable part of our community. We have other options. This is the worst option by far. Not even close. And, you know, when we had talked at the possibility of a police station being built on the back area, behind the gym, back behind that area. And do you know that during police department time, we actually have sex offenders in this community. And the sex offenders, guess where they go register? At the police department. So is that something we want to do while the recreation center's up and going, is having sex offenders registered right next to the community center? Good idea? I don't think so either. So obviously I'm not in favor of this. I will not be in favor of this. As I said before, this is the worst option. And this is, in football terms, this would be called an end around for those who wanted to repurpose the community center into City Hall. This is the old sleight of hand, and that's what this is. You can call it whatever you want to. You do your due diligence or whatever. This is our community center, and that's where it needs to stay. Thank you.
Only one, Ms. Gavricki, do you wish to speak to the matter?
No.
All right. I think we've all spoken our piece. I'm going to ask for the vote, and we might as well do it as a roll call because it sounds like we're not all together on this.
Okay, we had a motion by Hayes, supported by Keenan. We struck the 5th paragraph and ended at the word otherwise in the last paragraph. And an affirmative vote would push this resolution on to the DNR. A negative vote would mean no, just don't send it at all. So we'll start in alphabetical order. Councilman DiGiulio.
No.
Councilman Gavricki.
No.
Councilman Hayes.
Yes.
Councilman Keenan.
Yes.
Mayor Mategas.
No.
Councilman Cisco.
No.
And Councilman Templin.
No.
The noes have it. The resolution has failed.
We'll go forward. I have one community announcement. There's an application by the Intercity Baptist Church to hold an annual fireworks display on June 22nd, 2014. to start at 10 p.m. and an alternate date of July 1. It has been reviewed by police and fire and found without objection, and it's up to the council to determine.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hayes, seconded by Mr. Keenan. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for the vote. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That's carried. We are back to citizens' questions and comments, and it's limited to 5 minutes. And you are recognized, sir.
Thank you. Matt Tracer. Since I've been pretty critical of the lack of professionalism displayed by council and chair as far as Robert's rules go, I've decided that what I'm going to do with my 5 minutes from now on is conduct lessons in parliamentary procedure. Dealing with an arbitrary chair. Up to this point, we have been describing ways to deal with fractious members and meetings. What can members do when the chair is arbitrary and is the cause of the problems within the organization? First, determine if the chair possesses these negative characteristics. 1, refuses to recognize members. 2, ignores points of order. 3, ignores appeals. 4, will not put legitimate motions to a vote. 5, rejects proper amendments. 6, interrupts members during debate. 7, seizes the floor. 8, violates the bylaws. 9, refuses to protect the will of the majority. 10, refuses to protect the rights of the minority. Is arrogant towards members and guests. Is abusive towards members and guests. Imposes his or her will on the group. Increases the agenda, deviating from it at will, and adjourns meetings against the will of the members. If the behavior of the chair of your organization hits 5 or more of these characteristics, you are dealing with an arbitrary, dictatorial presiding officer. What can you and other officers and members do with this situation? Try some of the following measures. First, begin the discussion. Since I'm going to be conducting these lessons for a long time, I can take the time to try and get you to discuss this. Now, it's apparent to everybody that's ever seen one of these meetings that you have committed at least 7 of the acts that designate an arbitrary chair. Do you recognize them? That's going to make discussion really hard. I guess we'll skip discussion and go to use a point of order. Okay, now since the audience can't do that, that would be the obligation of one of you other folks. One of the points that should have been made, or a motion that should have been made, and I'm really hot about this, is when you told a decorated veteran of a foreign war that his blood only earned 4 minutes here in Podunkville, you overstepped your boundaries. And I blame the rest of council for not moving to suspend the rules and to allow that citizen to speak for as long as he wanted, not as long as it was convenient for the chair. That is the most despicable, cowardly overreach of parliamentary procedure I have ever seen. And shame on council for letting them get away with it. I'll continue with this lesson at the next meeting.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim O'Brien. I'm a 20-year resident of Allen Park. I will just briefly add that I've had some issues about the parliamentary procedure. Robert's here as well. For example, I believe Councilman Cisco's entire remarks were out of order because they didn't deal with the motion that was on the floor. And when the chair, who is empowered to address any matter that comes before the body, wishes to speak to it, he's supposed to hand the gavel off to the vice chair in order to make his own remarks. So, but anyway, I did not come up here to talk about parliamentary procedure. I came up here to talk about a subject that seems to be very near and dear to hearts in recent years, and that is due diligence. People love due diligence. As elected officials, I would hope that your diligence would be in representing the people who elected you to office. In that regard, I have been involved in politics for longer than I've lived here. And I can tell you that any election I've ever been involved in, getting to 60% of the vote is phenomenal. It's a landslide. I've never even heard of anything passing by 78%. And yet, the voters of this city, by a 4-to-1 margin, voted to amend the charter to say, we wish to be consulted before you borrow money. Now, there didn't seem to be any diligence on the part of our elected officials to represent that overwhelming sentiment of the people that they theoretically represent. Why not? What this body became very diligent about was using state law to trump what their own constituents want, and were clearly said that they wanted. Oh, we don't have to pay attention to that. We got a state law. You voters can sit down and shut up, because we get to do what we want because the state law says we can. Well, maybe the state law does say that, but it's not very diligent on your part to not represent the people who elected you. I don't care what the state law says. The fact of the matter is the people here wanted to vote on any more borrowing, and you were not diligent about reflecting that wish of our people. One of our council members at the last meeting said he took exception, great offense, to a letter that I had in the May 7th News Herald, in which he said I had the audacity to put falsities. Pardon me. I make every effort to be diligent about my facts, and I don't think I had anything factually incorrect in there. I don't know. I'm always open to that kind of a review. But the councilman said that he was not going to read the whole thing. But based on his remarks, I don't think he read it at all, because this was a 550-plus word letter that was all about whether or not the people get an opportunity to vote before we borrow money. That's what it was all about. It was only in the last 2 sentences of that letter that I kind of threw in a parenthetical. By the way, I believe our emergency manager could take care of this just by the authority she has under the EM law, which we've all been told is so all-powerful that she can do virtually anything, and we have to do what the emergency manager wants because her power is unlimited. As soon as I say, well, then change this contract, oh, no, she can't do that. Now, the due diligence theoretically exercised by our elected officials, I suspect, consisted of having a meeting with her in which they asked, can you do this? And she said, no. Okay. Due diligence. We've been diligent. We asked her. She said no. Now, of course, I was not in that meeting, but I have to assume, since I've heard this discussion go on before in other contexts, that she was referring to an article in the Michigan Constitution. Now, I wonder if anybody diligently actually looked at that article in the Michigan Constitution, because let me tell you what it says. It says, Article 9, Section 24, the accrued financial benefits of each pension plan and retirement system of the state and its political subdivisions shall be a contractual obligation thereof, which shall not be diminished or impaired thereby. Okay, I guess I'm going to end on that, but I will just say, note the word accrued financial benefits. Money that has not been received and is not earning interest is not accrued.
My name is Robert Turner, 15255 Morris Avenue. I guess I'm irritated. Dennis had I think, an appropriate idea, and you made two decisions today. You overruled him. You also made a decision that the City Hall would not be moved to the community center. That decision was made today. There's four options. Okay, we eliminated the community center today. The other one's over in the north end. Well, in fact, two of them are on the north end of town. Okay, pretty soon you hear people saying, "Oh, we don't want the city hall on the north end." That remark's going to be made. So the option you have now, according to the four options, is build a new city hall. Have we put any cost on anything? I'm sure you have in your meeting. And I would think the community center was probably the most economical move. I'm just like at this point. Also, to the attorney, does this body have the power to overrule ordinance?
Does this party?
Does the mayor and the council have the authority, power to overrule ordinance?
Well, it depends what kind of ordinance it is. There's a lot of variables as to what their power is.
I even hate to bring this up, but in the fireworks, the ordinance says, "It shall be unlawful for any person to unite, discharge, or also use fireworks except on the day preceding the day of or the day after a national holiday." So June the 22nd is not a holiday.
Is that a city ordinance?
Pardon me?
Is that
That's a city ordinance.
Which the city council adopted?
Yeah, city council adopted it.
And then if they have the power to adopt it, they have the power to grant moratoriums, to amend it, to revise it, to repeal it.
Okay, but they didn't do it tonight. They didn't have a resolution. They just voted on something without a resolution.
You're arguing with me, sir. I answered your question. What authority do they have? And I believe I answered.
Oh, okay. You're saying they have the authority to override.
If it's an ordinance that they have enacted. Now, if you're talking about a state law or anything like that, they cannot change that.
Okay. So ordinance is good reading, basically.
I'm sorry?
So ordinance is basically good reading.
Well, Bob, if I could just interject. It's more than just that. I mean,
I realize that.
I remember when the young fella, and I hate to even bring it up, was killed over there on Reek Road, and they came before the council, the previous council, and asked for a moratorium on the sign ordinance to be able to put the slow down signs up, and the council granted it. It's no different. What you read there was individuals that cites an individual person blowing off fireworks. I mean, I'm on the legal affairs, and we wrote that ordinance and we adopted it, and I can tell you that was not our intent. When the VFW was doing the fireworks over at Champaign Park as part of the Park Days, they had to come before the churches that come out now and spend tens of thousands of dollars to have the fireworks. I can tell you that in the packet tonight, they have certificates of liability insurance. I mean, they've gone through every thing.
I'm not against them having a fireworks at all. I mean, I support the city is a good neighbor.
What you're asking about is a ordinance that we adopted to try to curb individual people from blowing off fireworks all night long and riling dogs and people and everything else. That's totally different than an entity, not a person, an entity coming before the council and asking for permission to have a fireworks program. And yes, the answer is, as the attorney said, that is perfectly within our right to grant that permission.
Okay, thank you.
Am I recognized? Am I recognized?
You are recognized.
Ray McGusson, Quant, citizen of Allen Park. Couple of things. Mr. Mayor, at the last special meeting that we had next door, I believe that was a very special meeting. Maybe some of the information shouldn't have been given out to citizens, but we learned a lot. We learned how deeply in debt we're going to be unless something happens with the help of Ford Motor Company. But what you did, Mr. Mayor, you opened it up for citizen comments on the agenda, which we had no idea, nothing at all, what it was about. And then you moved the citizen comments to the very front. You did not give the citizen comments at the end. After we found out and after we heard what the meeting was about and the information that were given. There was individuals that came there a little late, and you told them that they were too late to even make a comment. I would appreciate you not to do that ever again. We, the citizens, need to have answers, and that's why comments are able to be made at the end of a meeting. The resolution that was passed here wasn't passed here because it wasn't passed. All it was trying to be done was to get the authorization from the DNR before you even attempted to move City Hall. That's basically what it was about. But on a lighter note, it's not really a lighter note. I'm going to make some statements here. Yesterday was Memorial Day. It was to recognize the deaths of all Americans that served for us and served in the armed forces. We are starting to forget about what that day is about. It's not about a day just to have the day off. And it's not just a day just to go ahead and have barbecues. But these are the facts, and they're going to shock you. We recognize the deaths. It's not Veterans Day, it's Memorial Day. It's not about the people who served, it's about the people who died. So here are the facts. And please bear with me. American war deaths, okay? And I might run out of my time, so I'm going to ask you just to go along with me a little bit. The Revolutionary War, 4,435 deaths. The War of 1812, 2,260. The Mexican War, 13,283. Gentlemen, my fellow Americans, the Civil War, 718,000 died. And they died, still are dying after the war. The Spanish-American War, 2,446. World War I, 116,516. World War II, 405,399. The Korean War, 36,574. The Vietnam War, that a lot of our people really remember, 58,220. The Gulf War, 383. The Iraq-Afghanistan War, 6,607. If you haven't added them up, there are 1,363,074. At this time, I'd like to recognize all those people. We should all do. I'd like to go ahead and let's just think about this. We can bow our heads, we can do whatever we want. Just a minute of silence for all those Americans, just Americans, that gave their lives so we have the right to come up here and talk. So please bow your heads.
We will take one moment of silence.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
McGusson.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great day.
Good evening. My name is Gail Monroe, Moore Avenue. I'm very happy to say that Panhandle Park is completely cut this morning. I did take pictures of it this morning at 9:30 when the 8 inches of grass was out there. At 10:30, they did show up. When we watched them the whole time, my neighborhood looks very clean now. I want to talk to Mr. Hayes about, or this $500,000 that the DNR is willing to give as a grant for recreational purposes. I understand that it's going to be tabled and everything, but why couldn't we use that $500,000 to bring the city back up to?
May I, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, certainly.
Let me clarify. We were given $500,000 many years ago, which
Okay.
went to help support the additions and the improvements to the building. It's not as though we're getting more money.
All right, I misunderstood that then, because I was thinking that maybe we should go to use that funding to get all our playgrounds up to the 1998 Act, where they have to be certain things have to be done. And that was just my,
We did receive some money for playgrounds, so I won't go into details, but if Mr. Haberkern's back there and he'd like to tell you, we did receive some grants, and there are some, I don't know them off the top of my head, but there are some playgrounds that will be getting revitalized through a grant.
all right then, thank you. Everybody have a great night.
Brian Diebold, Allen Park. I'd like to make a few comments. First of all, I have some objections to some of the council people and some of the remarks that they've been making. One councilman has stated several different times that people can come up to this podium and can say whatever they want, implying that people come up here are untruthful. I would like to point out that everybody on the council here has microphones also. And if you take a look at the half-truths, the deliberate misleading information, and the falsehoods that have been spoken from your microphones, it's pretty remarkable in itself also. So please, when you point fingers to people over here, I guess you might as well point fingers to yourself, saying that maybe everybody in this room, you cannot necessarily believe everything that is said. Another council person apparently has self-appointed himself to determine what is negative in the city. It seems that if he objects to, has a different opinion of what somebody says, he refers to them as being negative. This person has used terms of people that are coming up to this table, such as haters, as people trying to tear down the city, anti-government, and my personal favorite from a couple meetings ago, right-wing ultra-conservatives. And then he listed a series of attributes that were highly inflammatory. Then he has the audacity to call those people negative. I mean, this is hypocritical at best. I find it amusing, but it's unprofessional to sit there and to try to, I don't know if it's intimidation or whatever to the people coming up here, but name calling is kind of unprofessional. Also, I'd like to talk about the loan. Now, people have missed the whole point about this loan. We borrowed $3.3 million. And by the numbers of the city, they're going to end up, after you take all the income that came into the city, including the $3.3 million, and you pay off all the expenses, including the retirement, including the SLP properties, you end up with a net of $3.6 million. Excuse me, $3.55 million. So you borrow 3.3, and you end up with the higher number of 3.55. Now, what is so magical about this $3.3 million? It was never about paying the retirement. It was a great emotional issue of you have to pay the pension. You have to ask yourself some questions. Why wasn't there pension payments all along to pay off the $2.6 million? Why was it wasted? Why did people wait until the last minute to pay the $2.6 million? Same with the $700,000 for the SLP properties. Why wasn't that paid off during the course of the years? You could have very well picked up any expense items. You could have picked up lawyers or Plant Moran, and you could use that as an excuse, but it's not as emotional to sell that. You can't sell that, well, we have to borrow money in order to pay off the lawyers and Plant Moran and other things of that nature. It's much more emotional to say, well, we got to pay the pension. I mean, don't you like people that retired? That was the excuse. It was a phony number to begin with. It's so frustrating to point these things out and you still fall back on the same old story of, well, we needed the money to pay off the retirement. I contend that you didn't. And if it was a cash flow problem, why $3.3 million? Why not $2 million? Why not $1 million? Why not $500,000? Why did it have to be $3.3 million, and why were those two items cherry-picked? What was the reason? You have to ask yourself that. Also, went for a vote last August for the police and fire millage, and during the course of this current fiscal year, it brought in an extra $2 million to the city. Just by a stroke of a pen, without any vote whatsoever, you just brought in another $3.3 million. Why have millages when you can just go out and borrow money on your own volition, despite what the vast majority of the people, you want a mandate, that was a mandate from the citizens. I do have a question. If you take $3.5 million and you deduct last fiscal year's $700,000 of deficit, you end up with $2.8 million for a balance. Next year, that running balance becomes $5.3 million. And the next fiscal year after that, by June 2016, we have a running balance of $7.2 million. My question is, in the millage, there was all sorts of talk about a rollback. People love to talk about the rollback. What triggers the rollback? The $7.2 million represents 35% of the revenue. What triggers the rollback? Anybody? I guess you can, again, I guess you can say whatever you want at any of the microphones.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Simmons, and I live on Keppen in Allen Park, and I wish to speak on the DTE smart meter. I'm one of the Allen Park citizens who have been bullied and frightened by both DTE and URG. No, they did not come to my house, but when my husband and I called both companies and tried to explain why we were and are refusing the smart meter, their treatment of us was unreasonable. We were very civil in explaining our desires, but they wanted to hear none of it and said that they did not care. We called more than once to each company and were never given consistent answers to our questions, which gave us cause to assume someone is lying. If that's the case, why do they feel they must resort to lying other than to bully us into settling for something other than our right to choose? My husband and I have two reasons for refusing the smart meter. One is the physical and health concerns. We've seen too much information leaning toward the new meters being a serious health and physical hazard, and because I'm experiencing fragile health problems, I do not desire adding this on top of those. The other reason is being denied the right to choose and an invasion of my privacy. I do not want anyone using a readout of my activities to control my power usage or to monitor what I do in my own home. Given the option to pay for something we do not want or will not use is ludicrous, to say the least. The deactivated smart meter is a lie. It is the same exact meter, and it is activated when installed. When the power company gets around to deactivating it, which could be months, that new meter will still continue to emit hazardous radio frequencies. Yes, I realize that we are surrounded by radio frequencies even within our own homes, like cell phones, Wi-Fi, and microwaves. But the key issue is that we, as citizens, have a choice whether to bring those items into our home or not. And also, they do not emit as strong a current as the smart meter. In the case of DTE, we are being told we do not have a choice. Well, as Americans, we do. It is my understanding you plan to have a presentation on the smart meters, including both sides, at the June 10th City Council meeting. Please have a representative from DTE, URG, and also those who can address the pros and cons of the smart meter or advanced meter. I recommend you invite David Sheldon and Linda Kurtz, who are well-versed on the potential hazardous effects that the smart meter may have. I also ask you to allow each presenter a minimum of 15 minutes to adequately give their important information. Please allow us as concerned citizens to ask questions and receive honest answers. I also urge you to pass a resolution that will allow any citizens who wish to keep their analog meters, which are not obsolete. If you will not consider this, why? Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Bruce Aberford, Champaign Road. I don't juggle mics too well. I want to say one thing. I don't think there's been anything in the history in Allen Park that has gone smoothly. I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to talk briefly with Mrs. Folks and about setting up a meeting, and she asked me for some information. And in time to make sure that she's very well prepared at our meeting, I came across some stuff that I thought should be shared with you and the people here tonight and the people at home. But just to give you an example, on May 2nd, 1952, by a margin of only 29 votes out of 3837 cast, Allen Park voters voted for cityhood. It took 5 years and 3 charter commissions before that actually occurred. The first charter was defeated by about 1,100 votes. Second one was 400 votes. And then finally, they listened to the people. And when the final charter was approved, it was approved by over 7,000 votes. What people don't realize is that we had a shared police station in City Hall on Philomene, and which was very cramped. So they went out and they, in 1957, when we became a city, we rented, or we bought an old hardware store, which today you know as Rumpkins at Allen Garfield. And one of the council members happened to be in there one day, and I pointed out, yeah, this was the council chamber and the courthouse. This was the offices, the front area, and actually what is the office today was the mayor's office back in those days. There was a proposal with Ford Motor Company, which at the Road to Nowhere, as it was called now, it's known as Enterprise Drive. And the proposal there, as I was going through getting the information from Mrs. Folks, we bought the land from Ford Motor Company, $10,000 an acre. We bought 20 acres, $200,000. And it was also going to include ice arena, tennis court, and swimming pool. But then there was all this talk, well, we don't need all these luxuries. So we cut it back to 15 acres, $150,000. And then Ford says, well, we'll throw in 2.5 acres free of charge just to do this. But it still couldn't be done. 3 times it passed the council 6-1. But the one vote was so obstinate that it never happened. And it was offered back to Ford Motor Company. We stayed in the old hardware store. And then we came over to here, to this building. This building, we had to go to court. We were sued by Gilead Baptist because everybody was hemming and hawing about doing it. And actually, some people wanted to put it on the ballot. The court said, no, it doesn't have to be voted on by the people. So, you know, this was this discussion that Mr. O'Brien had. A few years ago, this beautiful brochure came out with a large building next door. And it said, a temporary solution. 1974, the city of Allen Park purchased the former Gilead Baptist Church to serve as an interim city hall and police department while plans for a permanent location were developed. And it said Honeywell had entered a bid to refurbish this building. It was $8.8 million. That because of the long obsolete facilities and the roof and everything else, it was costing the city $600,000 per year. You know, so that's the amount of money we've been wasting on all this time. And then it was to propose the building over there, sitting there, that we were going to move into. Well, that never happened. I've not been over happy about the 4 proposals, and I've been, again, when I moved into this building, when it came in, I worked for the Parks and Rec Department. I ran the auditorium. I designed the lighting way back then, and then became city treasurer. After my term was up, I moved over to the court for 3 years because it became a district court. So I lived in this building practically for 7 years. So I know how it developed and everything. I've been through all this stuff about locating City Hall. In fact, I told Mrs. Folks when she first came here that was going to be one of the toughest decisions that she was going to have to do. I'm going to recommend that the Oakwood Hospital facility, which is located in downtown Allen Park, is for lease, is given consideration for at least the City Hall part of it. So, number 5.
Dorothy Bean, College Avenue, Allen Park. Council members, Mayor, I'd like to thank you all for your efforts to making it possible for a DTE rep to be present on the next agenda on June 10th. I appreciate that very much. Also, the speaker is David Sheldon, that I had planned on being here as well. And he wants a 15-minute rebuttal to DTE presentation. So I am also asking for a question and answer period after that as well for the citizens. I thank you for making this possible for the citizens to be informed, to make an educated choice if they want the smart meter or not. Now, I asked all you members what actions have been taken since the last meeting for a resolution for those of us that choose to keep our analog meters, that we are not bullied by DTE or any other utility company. So I would really like, in your time period that you have to talk, if you would please, each one of you reply, if you will, what type of actions have been taken toward this. I very much would like to have the citizens hear this. In the meantime, the utility company is moving in. By time this June 10th meeting, how much of Allen Park has already been metered? So that's a concern, that if it would have taken place today, people would have had some education that they could lean on and do more research on, if this is what they want. To me, this is an enemy coming into my home. This is a poison coming into my home. If you do not see it this way, there's many citizens that do see it this way. So I would really respect you looking at us to giving us a choice. Mr. Mayor, when I sat in your office on May 5th, that was a Monday, May 5th, it was an impromptu visit. It was not a scheduled visit, and I did not intend on speaking with you. But through the avenues, I was led to speak with you. At that time, I wanted to ask, I was led to you to be asked if I could have a 15-minute presentation for the smart meter educator. We exchanged our views. You told me you disagreed with my point of opposing the smart meters. At the last meeting, you made a comment in your section that you spoke with me and you told the citizens of Allen Park that I spent 2 hours with you. It was not 2 hours, sir. It was less than 30 minutes. It was less than 30 minutes, and you told the citizens here that I spent 2 hours, about 2 hours with you. Also, sir, you mentioned about the water meters were smart meters here in the city of Allen Park. What I have attached to my home is a census attachment that you can sense what my meter gauge is. I called the company today, the census company that provides that box. I also went on the website. I spoke with a representative. Her name is Myra at 1-800-638-3748. I provided her with my model number. She told me from what I gave her, this is battery operated, battery generated, and it's only transmitted when it's red. I believe I get my bill every 3 months from the water department. So that means it's only red every 3 months, and it's battery operated. I asked her if any radiation comes from it, and she said no. So I just would like to make a clarification, and if you have any other documentations that conflicts with what I'm told, I would really like to see it, sir. But I do not, I'm offended when there's things that's been said that's leading to what I'm seeing is not true. I would also like to make a comment about, okay, well, thank you very much.
My name is Eileen Nielsen, Allen Park resident. I agree with everything Nancy Simmons said, addressed to you tonight. I also would like a public meeting, which I also asked for at the last city council meeting, between the DTE representative and a smart meter educator to show both sides to the people of Allen Park so they can decide for themselves, and not to have this smart meter that has been proven over and over how dangerous it is to health and privacy. Let the people decide for themselves. Don't shove it down our throat, please. We do still live in America, land of freedoms. I'd also wish that you would announce beforehand to the public, to the entire city of Allen Park, that this meeting will take place, either by a newspaper article, a newspaper statement, or even on the city channel beforehand, so people can come and hear. I also ask that during this meeting, of the DTE rep and the smart meter rep that the public can ask questions afterwards for as long as need be. Now, I'm not talking 5 hours, and anybody who doesn't want to stay can leave whenever they want to. So I just hope you seriously take these requests by many people into consideration. And meanwhile, could you please pass a resolution to have the smart meters installation stopped until the public knows the full story? Thank you very much.
Charles Blevins, Champaign. Question, is the PowerPoint where there was the 4 options, is that on the city website?
I really don't know.
If it is at this time.
If it's not, can it please be on the website so that the citizens can see the 4 options that the citizens will soon probably have to pay for of the movement and stuff like that? Secondly, is there like a thing where City Hall and the police department have to be in the same building? No? Okay. If that's the case, if I think of the building that Bruce was saying where the old middle school was on Allen Road, I feel like that could be another building to look at, since I believe that the doctor's offices that are in there now are moving to a new building just down the street, so we have plenty of room in that building. Now, the police department, just an option, I would think could move to that building next to Thunderbolt Lanes that you want to lease, so it'd be 2 different buildings, or combine fire and the police department together into a new building, save the art. But that's just a couple options that I was thinking when the types of discussions were coming up here, but just a couple options just in my head. Thank you.
No other citizens who wish to come forward. I'm going to go to our elected officials' comments, and tonight we will start with Mr. Templin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and their comments, and seniors, good luck on graduation. You made your last meeting. Got a couple more days of school left. God bless you, and hope your future comes out well for you all. Thank you. Good night.
Councilman DiGiulio.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the first thing I'd like to talk about is our Memorial Day Parade on Sunday, May 18th. It was really a pleasure to see John Dingle there. He's quite a man to speak with. And it was really a great pleasure to drive Ernie Helowinski again this year, as I've done for the past several years in the Memorial Day Parade. Something I don't think most people know about him, but he was one of 6 brothers that all served in the armed forces. And let's see, and then we had Saturday was the Allen Park High School prom, and I enjoyed seeing my grandson coming over to the house all dressed up, ready to go to the prom, and my granddaughter too. So a lot of people don't know I got a granddaughter too that's graduating. Anyway, it is more enjoyable being a grandfather than being a father. You don't have all the grief. And I guess the last thing would be on Friday night, May 16th, we had here at the we had a Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and even Marilyn Monroe showed up. And it was quite a night. I mean, there was about 125 people that were there, and it was a really nice show. I was sorry to see that more people didn't know about it and didn't come to it, because many said that they didn't. And I want to thank Nancy Nick, Pam Syke, and Sue Christie. They were the ones that put this on, and they did a great job for us. And with that, for the Parks and Rec Foundation, I guess with that, I'll just say good night at this point. Thank you.
Councilwoman Gabarecki.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to wish congratulations and best wishes to the class of 2014. So may your dreams all come true, and the road is yours, so good luck. I also want to thank everyone for coming out to the Memorial Day Parade. For those that helped out before, during, and after. Hopefully next year we can get more people to come out. But I personally want to thank the CERT team from Melvindale and Allen Park for their members for coming out and assisting us with the parade route that day. I truly appreciate it, and I know I think the city and the organizers did as well. So with that being said, CERT is looking for a few more new members. They're trying to start a class in, are you done? In June. So if you're interested, please seek Lieutenant Egan, or I believe the applications are also in the clerk's office. So with that, thank you and good night.
Councilman Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll recall at the last meeting, I mentioned a gentleman whose name I did not know. I've come to know his name, and I've come to realize he's sitting here with us tonight, Mr. Jim Powell, who was the gentleman I referred to, who you talk about moving Allen Park forward, being positive, building up the city. Here's a guy who daily is down on Allen Road picking up cigarette butts that some of you probably left there, or some of us, picking up trash every single day, and he has been for years. In fact, years ago, he used to have his little dog, Pepper. God rest Pepper's soul, but Pepper's no longer with us, but Pepper used to kind of point him in the right direction, I guess. So, Jim, I want to recognize you, and I'm sure our community thanks you for your kind. There's his little stick he used to pick things up. Now, I was interested to hear Mr. Haberkern's comments about the plans, and you'll also recall at the last meeting I referred to two former mayors who talked about their grandiose plans of years ago. I might have said 10 or 12 years. It might have been 22, 4 years. Plans seem to have a habit of never really coming to fruition. And I think my resolution, which was defeated, that's the way things go. You know, I don't take it personally. I'm not going to go home and scream into my phone to somebody and blame somebody for being negative or tearing down my resolution or anything like that. It's not the way I am. But I think the point I was trying to make is we don't really have plans. We've got some architectural drawings that are 6 years old or 5 years old that presuppose a certain amount of space being required with no regard to consolidation of services, using jail cells elsewhere, combining buildings that we own, trying to do something fiscally responsible. Instead, we would waive our opportunity to even explore this possibility because, doggone it, we got to have our recreation. And I believe we need to have recreation. There's more than one way to skin a cat, though. So I guess I'm just kind of shocked that we can't even have the foresightedness enough to go and say, let's explore this. And if it doesn't work out, be the first to say it didn't work out. But the proposals we got now don't bode too well in my view. Third thing, I do want to congratulate Chris Egan, Lieutenant Chris Egan. I watched him at the parade a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and this guy's running around like the Energizer Bunny. He had his yellow cap on and he had his CERT. He takes that very seriously, and I respect him for that because he's the one that got up here and coordinated with Melvindale, and God bless him for taking that responsibility on. Not everybody in the city chooses to volunteer to organize something like that. They like a lot of talk about things, but they don't often get out there and run around. He was up and down the streets, moving barriers and all kinds of things. Finally, I must respectfully, and I mean this, respectfully disagree with some of my neighbors and friends who may feel bullied by the DTE or the URG or the radio manufacturers or whatever they are. I don't know what the problem is. I've read the literature. I've read the World Health Organization's viewpoints. I've seen as much as I can stand. I get a steady flow of information many times a day, and I apologize if I'm a little sarcastic in my responses, but frankly, I don't see what the big to-do is all about. And if that makes me a bad guy, I guess I'll accept that badge. And I'm happy to see Josh here, who's a seminarian, and hope it's going well for you, Josh, and thank you. And Charles, it's always great to see you get up and say a few words. And to the high school students who I normally don't address because they probably hear enough of me anyway, I do commend you to your futures. I hope you have a successful graduation. I hope if you choose college or choose a career from here, you have the best of luck. And I know you've had good training, you have a good school system, and I'm sure you'll do very fine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Keenan.
Well, I too want to just say that I'm very proud of our high schools here in the city. It's an amazing thing for a city that's basically 7 square miles to have 3 high schools that are so exceptional. Allen Park High School has always been very recognized for their scholastic abilities and sports. Cabrini likewise, and inner city. For a small community like we are, to have 3 exceptional high schools where, like I said, both scholastically and athletically, all 3 of them have been in state championships, won state championships, and stay competitive year after year. I think it's a true blessing to our community, and I want to congratulate all you folks that have taken the opportunity to be educated here in Allen Park, and should be thankful to your parents that they moved here and gave you that ability to utilize some of the better schools in the area. So, and I do want to hope that you make some wise career paths decisions as the time allots, and that you have very successful careers as you go on in life. I don't really have a lot to say tonight about anything in the meeting. I think that everything that was pretty much said here tonight has been said over and over. I don't really pretend to want to go tit for tat with anybody from the microphone. I would just say that several of us up here, myself included, ran for this office in what I would consider dire straits and some decisions that were made. And we ran for the office, and several of us, and I think most of us, ran for the office with the idea of trying to bring some integrity back to the office. Now, some of you may sneer at that or have something to say about that, but I can tell you that I sit here tonight and every night knowing, and I've said before, that every decision that I've made up here, every vote, every comment that I've made up here has been what I've believed to be the truth and the best comment, and I've done nothing that, you know, that would make me question my integrity. I am harder on myself when I do something wrong than anybody in this place could ever be. Anybody that knows me personally knows that when I make a mistake, as I have, and when I've made mistakes and I've said stuff up here that was wrong, I've chomped at the bit. I've reached out to those people to apologize, and I've waited to the next meeting, chomping at the bit to come here and say that I did say something wrong, and I've acknowledged that. Never anything else. I would hope that you folks would understand that those of us that are in the closed session meetings, those of us that are given the information, may just possibly have a little bit more information than what you do. And I would hope that you would grant some of us a little slack in our responses. And I've always said, and I'll say it again, I'm always open to sitting down with you and having a discussion. At the end of that discussion, we may not agree, but at least you'd know that there's a method to my madness. And we don't have to agree on everything, but I'm more than willing to sit down with any of you. And quite frankly, as I look in the audience, there's a lot of you that I have sat down with. And I'll do it again if I need to. And we don't have to agree, but understand that I don't think it's fair for me or anybody up here that you question our integrity, because I don't think that anybody up here ran with the idea of trying to do anything other than better our community. We may do it in different ways, we may have different thoughts and ideas, but I don't think that anybody ran for this office and really, quite frankly, the headache that we get for our $2,250 a year and all the time that we put in meetings well beyond this meeting to do anything other than try to move this city forward. Thank you.
Councilman Cisco.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I could address a few things in a positive manner. You know, there's something, the last administration that was here, by all means, they made a lot of mistakes, and we are all paying for them now, and we're all trying to fix them as best as possible within our limits. One of the reasons why we have an emergency manager. But I believe that there's a greater thing happening in our city. We see all the young people in the audience that come for a government class, which is a great thing. But there's a storm brewing in our city. And you've seen some of that storm that's happened in our nation's capital when the government got shut down. You've seen that, and you've seen how ugly it is. Some of that ugliness is here in this city. Now, it appears that I've touched a few people's buttons here lately. And I just want to be able to say that people of Allen Park, you know what your city's about. You know what the good things are. And we need to focus on those good things. And it's not to dump on the reality of where we are, but it's how do we want to get to the end? How do we want to get to that good place? And I'd just like to, I'd like to make a comment on the people that came up and spoke about DTE this meeting and last meeting. And I want to commend all of you people for coming up here and being so precise and respectful at this podium. You deserve kudos for all of that. You've been respectful to all of us, and in return, we all should be respectful to you and try to find out a solution for your problems. And I think some of the people that have come up here and spoken, I've spoken to some of those people, that we're trying to do that. Because I don't have to believe anything, but I have to believe you that you're wanting something, and that we have an obligation to do that. So I'm very thankful for your presentations. I've learned a few things. And now the big thing is the students in the audience right now. Friday morning, half a day, last day of school, is that correct? This week will go on forever until Friday. And I just want to say that, you know, Mr. Habercorn came up here and gave you a little bit of history of Allen Park. My first council meeting was at, which is now Rumpkins, was in my senior year in 1969 at Allen Park High School. That's where I went to my first council meeting. Long time. I know I don't look that old. But I want to be able to tell you that maybe one day when you come back in the community and you run for office and you've established yourself and you decided that Allen Park is a good place to come live. Allen Park is a good place to raise your kids. Safe city. All the things that you like. Sometimes high school doesn't go too well some days it goes really good. But the best part of your lives are now coming. You're out of high school, some of you will go to college, some of you will do other things, and you're going to attain great things. And I just want to, you know, there's a lot of people in this class that I know. And I've seen a lot of you grow up, you just look, little kids. So, do well, and be safe. Thank you.
Clerk Mizzy.
I just want to touch on a couple things. First of all, kudos to the Allen Park seniors. What they said previously is all true. It's a window of opportunity, and I just want to let you guys know, when you're all done with school or establish yourself, Allen Park is a great community to raise a family. I never thought of leaving. I did go off to college for a few years, and I came back, and I did raise my family here. So don't forget about us, because your family's probably going to stay here, and they're awesome babysitters. So trust me, you're not there yet, but when you get there, God bless in-laws and your parents. But also, I want to touch down on DTE. Either way, I just want to let you know, I'm not the one contacting them. I know the city has diligently tried contacting them. However, being here for as long as I have and watching people fight with DTE, I just want to warn you, don't get your hopes up. We had an issue, I think it was them cutting down trees in front of houses. They hacked them all to heck, killed some. We demanded DTE here for, I think it was 2 or 3 months. And they kept saying, oh yeah, we'll send someone, we'll send someone, we'll send someone. Do you think they ever showed up? So I just want you guys to understand, these people have all of us have very little control what a private company does with regards to showing up here and doing it how we want, okay? But with that, I just want to let people out at home and anyone in the audience here, if you're on our permanent absentee application list to receive an absentee ballot, we will be mailing them out in the next week or so. So expect that in the mail. Now, please keep in mind that it is a dual election application, which means it has the August primary and the November general. Please mark which elections you want it for. I am no longer allowed to just guess or mark both. We have to return them. And unfortunately, there's quite a few people who just send it back and then we mail the ballots, but law does dictate the voter has to mark the elections they want them. So please, at the very top where you sign your name, you're going to see what election. It's going to say the August and the November. You can mark both, or you can mark just individual ones. With that, I'd like to thank all of you coming out tonight. God bless you and good night.
City Administrator Folks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to lend my voice of congratulations to the graduating seniors. You are embarking on a great journey, and you get to design how successful the rest of your life is. So I do wish you well. Second of all, I want to thank Mr. Habercorn for that glimpse, tantalizing glimpse of the city of Allen Park's 62-year history. I suspect we're going to have a fascinating meeting. And I also want to thank Mr. McGusson. You know, Memorial Day is an extremely special day. And I underscore that with the students that are here from the government class as well. Sometimes we tend to forget the lives that have been given so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we exercise on a daily basis. So thank you for providing those stark and meaningful statistics. I think that that was very beneficial to all of us. And last, I want to say, Charles, you asked about the 4 options, and let me look into it so that we can make sure that those options are available and accessible to the citizens in some way, because my tagline to that is I just want to remind citizens of what Mrs. Parker also asked you to do, and that is with those 4 options, we would like to hear from you. Feel free to email either her or myself if you have some thoughts to share on any one or all of these options. And with that, I say good night and stay safe. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and to the graduating seniors, you actually get to hear my little speech graduation night, so I will wish you well at that time. The smart meter and Ms. Bean, we have been trying to get DTE Energy to come out. As you probably should understand, DTE Energy thinks it had lots of public hearings before the Public Service Commission, in which notices were given to all of us. And so, and when I talked with Ms. Bean, I did tell her that I would not let either DTE Energy, if it's within my power, or the people who feel that the smart meters are deleterious to their health or an invasion of their privacy, that neither group should come and speak without the other being here, and that the citizens hear both sides. And it may be more a presentation by both groups than a give and take answer session. So just be prepared that it may be a different type of situation than you may agree to, because DTE is going to insist on certain things before they send anybody and come here. So with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Hayes has moved.
Support.
Ms. Gawarecki has seconded. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 8:52, 7:52.